The wind moaned through the valley like a wounded animal, clawing at the old pines and carrying with it a breath of bitter frost. Snow stretched for miles across the desert basin, covering the land like a burial shroud. Beneath the fading light of dusk, a lonely fire crackled near an abandoned stagecoach road, its flames fighting against the endless cold. Beside it sat Taza, an Apache man with a face carved by both weather and war. His long black hair, streaked with frost, was tied with rawhide at the nape of his neck. The firelight danced over his high cheekbones and the faint scars, running down his forearms, reminders of battles fought and survived. He was a man who spoke little, lived alone, and trusted less. He had made camp near a narrow canyon called Silver Hollow, a forgotten stretch of land few dared to cross. The railroad had turned men greedy, and the wilderness turned them cold. But to Taza, the silence of winter was a kind of peace, the only peace he'd known since. The war between his people and the settlers ended in blood as the night deepened. The wind carried something new, not the howl of coyotes or the whisper of snow, but the faint sound of hooves. And then a cry. Taza's hand went instantly to his knife. From beyond the ridge, a horse stumbled into view, its rider barely clinging to the saddle. The woman was wrapped in a tattered shawl, her hair loose and dark against the snow. When the horse stopped near the fire, she swayed, then fell to the ground with a soft cry. Taza rose and approached slowly, his moccasins silent against the snow. He saw her face, pale, lips trembling, eyes half open. She was perhaps 30, beautiful in a weary, haunted way. Her hands were red with cold, her breath shallow. He crouched beside her. "You ride alone in this storm?" he asked in a deep, low voice. She blinked at him through half-frozen lashes. "I didn't think I'd find anyone out here. You're lucky you did." He helped her to her feet and guided her to the fire. Her clothes were soaked through, her boots stiff with ice. He threw a blanket over her shoulders and poured water from his canteen into a small tin cup. She took it, her hand shaking violently. For a long while, the only sound between them was the fire popping. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." Taza nodded. "You have a name?" She looked into the fire, as if afraid of what answering might cost her. "Evelyn Shaw," she said at last. "From the town of Red Rock, or what's left of it." Taza frowned slightly. Red Rock was a week's ride south, a mining settlement burned in an attack 2 winters ago. "Few survived. You came far," he said. Evelyn's eyes met his. There was a sadness in them, heavy and hollow. "Farther than I ever meant to." The fire crackled between them. Taza studied her, the small tremor in her voice, the way she kept glancing toward the dark, as if someone or something might still be following her. He spoke again, quietly. "The road is dangerous tonight. You can rest here." Her lips curved faintly, though her eyes stayed solemn. "And what about you? You trust strangers that easily?" "I trust the cold," he said. "It kills without asking." She let out a small, broken laugh, the first hint of warmth in her voice. The night grew darker, and the snow thickened until the world beyond their fire became a swirling white void. Evelyn shivered beneath the blanket, her breath fogging in the air. Then, almost in a whisper, she said the words that made Taza's heart still. "It's too much cold outside," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Can you hold me in your arms for tonight?" The fire hissed. For a long moment, Taza said nothing. His dark eyes met hers, searching, cautious, but not unkind. The cold pressed harder around them, the silence between them thick with unspoken stories. At last, he set aside his knife, rose, and moved closer. Evelyn's gaze followed every motion, her breath quick and uneven. When he sat beside her, she leaned against him without a word. His body radiated heat, the kind that came from endurance, not comfort. He hesitated only a moment before pulling the blanket wider around them both. Outside, the wind screamed through the canyon, but near the fire, their hearts beat louder than the storm. Evelyn closed her eyes. Tayan didn't know yet who she truly was, what she'd run from, or why her name made his chest tighten, as if he'd heard it once before in a darker place. But tonight was not a night for answers. It was a night for warmth and for ghosts to rest in silence, and as the fire dimmed beneath the winter moon, neither knew that this chance meeting, born of snow and fear, would burn brighter and deadlier than either could imagine. Evelyn woke to the sound of crackling wood and the faint hum of wind slipping through the canyon walls. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was, only the warmth that still lingered around her shoulders, the heavy blanket, and the steady heartbeat she had fallen asleep beside. When her eyes opened fully, she saw Tayan crouched near the dying fire, feeding it a few last pieces of wood. The morning light was pale and gray, turning the snow around them into a mirror of cold steel. His back was to her, the powerful lines of his body framed against the fog rising from the ground. She pushed herself up slowly, clutching the blanket around her. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice raw from the cold. "I didn't mean to fall asleep on you." Tayan didn't turn. "You needed warmth," he said simply. "The storm almost took you." Evelyn nodded, though her eyes were distant. She remembered fragments, the long ride through the blizzard, the sound of men's voices shouting behind her, the flash of firelight before darkness claimed her. She swallowed hard. "Thank you," she whispered. Now he looked at her. His dark eyes were unreadable, but not unkind. "You said you came from Red Rock," he said. "There's nothing left there. Why ride through the night alone?" Evelyn hesitated. The wind rustled through the pine branches as if urging her to lie, to hide. But something about his calmness made her want to tell the truth. "I wasn't riding from Red Rock," she said quietly. "I was riding toward it." Tayan frowned. "There is nothing left to find there but bones and broken stone." "I know," she said. "My husband was buried there." The fire cracked sharply. Tayan said nothing, but she saw his jaw tighten slightly. "Your husband," he repeated, his tone steady but distant. "Yes," she murmured. "James Shaw. He was a foreman at the mine before it burned. They said the Apache raided it." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through the wind. Tayan stood slowly, his eyes fixed on the snow beyond their camp. "Many things are said," he replied after a long pause. "Not all are true." Evelyn studied him, realizing only now how close she had come to dying in the arms of a man her people once called an enemy. Yet his gentleness, the way he had shielded her from the cold without asking anything in return, none of it fit the stories told in town saloons. Still, before she could answer, Tayan stiffened suddenly. His eyes darted toward the ridge behind them. "What is it?" she whispered. He held up a hand. "Stay quiet." Moving with silent precision, he crouched and examined the ground near the fire. His fingers brushed over faint impressions in the snow, hoof prints, fresh ones, leading toward the canyon's mouth. "They were here," he said under his breath. Evelyn's heart began to pound. "Who?" Tayan rose to his full height, scanning the tree line. "Man. 2, maybe 3. They followed your trail." Her blood ran cold. "They can't be. I thought I lost them near Dry Creek." Tayan turned to her, his gaze sharp now. "You're being hunted." She looked down, her hands trembling. "I didn't steal anything. I swear. I only took what was mine, what he left me." "What did he leave you?" Her lips parted, but before she could speak, the distant echo of a horse's neigh cut through the morning stillness. Tayan's hand went instantly to his knife. "They're close." He stepped to his horse, fastening the saddle in seconds. Evelyn stood frozen, torn between fear and disbelief. "What are we going to do?" she asked. He looked back at her. You're going to ride. I don't even know where to go. Tayan's eyes softened slightly. Then ride with me. Without another word, he swung onto his horse and extended his hand. She hesitated, but only for a breath. The memory of that warm fire, of the safety she felt beside him, was stronger than the fear chasing her. She grasped his hand and climbed up behind him. The horse surged forward through the snow, hooves pounding over the frozen ground. The cold air bit at their faces, but Evelyn held on tight, her arms wrapped around his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat against her cheek. Behind them, faint but growing louder, came the echo of more hooves. 3 riders cutting through the canyon, dark shapes against the pale morning light. Tayan guided the horse up a narrow pass between 2 cliffs, moving with the precision of someone who knew every twist of the land. Snow kicked up around them like ash. Evelyn dared a glance back. She saw movement, flashes of metal, and the unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked. "Tayan!" she cried. He turned sharply, pulling the reins. The horse slid to a halt behind a rock outcropping. In one motion, Tayan dismounted and drew his bow from the saddlebag. His movements were smooth, practiced, lethal. Evelyn slid down beside him, her breath catching. "You're going to fight them?" He looked at her, his expression calm even as the wind howled. "No," he said. "I'm going to warn them." She frowned in confusion. "Warn them?" He nodded once. "That the winter doesn't forgive fools." Then he stepped out into the open snow, bow in hand. As 3 riders appeared from the ridge, rifles raised, faces hidden by scarves. And for the first time, Evelyn saw who was chasing her, and understood that the storm she'd fled from wasn't over. The riders slowed their horses as they spotted Tayan standing in the open snow, bow drawn and steady. His long black hair whipped across his shoulders, the feathers tied into it snapping in the wind like warnings from the earth itself. "Stay back," he called in a calm but deadly voice, the arrow already notched. The lead rider, a heavy man wrapped in a fur coat, raised a hand to signal the others. His voice cut through the cold, rough and arrogant. "Easy there, Redskin. We're just looking for a woman rode this way. Pale, dark hair, about 30. You seen her?" From behind the rock ledge, Evelyn held her breath. She recognized that voice, Clay Moran, the man who'd once worked under her husband at the Red Rock mine. A brute who'd wanted more than the gold the miners found underground. Tayan's eyes didn't flicker. "You ride too close to my fire," he said evenly. Clay chuckled, a sound as dry as gunpowder. "We don't want trouble. Just the lady. She stole something that belongs to us." Tayan's grip on the bow tightened slightly. "Belongs to you?" "Her husband owed a debt," Clay sneered. "When he died, it passed to her. She took something from the company safe and ran off. Gold bars, 3 of them. You hand her over. We might let you walk away." Evelyn's pulse hammered in her throat. Gold bars? She'd taken nothing of the sort, only a small leather pouch her husband had hidden before the fire. She still didn't know what was inside. Tayan's voice cut through her panic. "There's no woman here," he said, his tone calm but cold. Clay squinted, his smile turning mean. "You sure about that?" Before he could move, Tayan's arrow thudded into the snow, just inches from his horse's front hoof. The animal reared, snorting in fear. "I said leave," Tayan growled. The other 2 riders reached for their rifles, but Clay held up a hand, glaring at the Apache. "You got guts, I'll give you that. But you don't know who you're protectin'. She's poison, that one. She bring death on you same as she did on her husband." Tayan said nothing. He stood like a statue carved from stone, every muscle coiled with quiet strength. Finally, Clay spat into the snow. "Fine, have it your way. But when the snow clears, we'll be back." He turned his horse sharply, and the 3 riders disappeared into the mist. their hoofbeats echoing down the canyon until only the wind remained. Tayan lowered his bow but didn't move right away. He listened, every instinct sharpened, until he was certain they were gone. Then, without looking back, he said quietly, "You can come out now." Evelyn stepped from behind the rocks, her face pale. "You shouldn't have lied for me." He turned to her, eyes dark and unreadable. They weren't looking for truth. She clutched the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "You don't understand. They'll kill you for helping me. Clay Moran doesn't stop until he gets what he wants." Tayan studied her for a moment. "And what do you have that he wants so badly?" Evelyn hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small leather pouch, worn, scorched around the edges. She untied the cord and tipped it into her palm. Inside was not gold, not silver, but a single medallion, round and carved with strange markings. Tayan's eyes widened slightly. He took a slow step closer. "Where did you get this?" "My husband," she whispered. "Before the fire. He said if anything happened to him, I should keep it safe. He said it wasn't from the mine, it was found beneath it." Tayan reached out and gently took the medallion. The moment his fingers brushed it, a strange look crossed his face, a mix of memory and disbelief. "This is not white man's gold," he said softly. "This is sacred. Apache burial symbol. From the Valley of Spirits." Evelyn's brow furrowed. "He said it was part of something ancient. He wanted to return it, but the company refused. They said it would fetch more than any gold vein." Tayan's jaw clenched. "They dug where they shouldn't have." She looked at him, confusion and fear mingling in her eyes. "What does it mean?" He stared at the medallion glinting faintly in the firelight. "It means your husband didn't die in a mine fire," he said finally. He was silenced. Evelyn's breath caught. Silenced by Clay? Tayan's gaze met hers, deep, unflinching. By all of them. A heavy silence fell between them. The snow began to fall again, soft and relentless, as though the land itself was listening. Evelyn sank beside the fire, her hands trembling. "So all this time, I thought I was running from debt collectors, but I'm running from murderers." Tayan nodded once. "And now they've seen your trail. What will we do?" She whispered. He stepped closer, his shadow stretching across her face, strong and sure. "We go to Red Rock," he said, "to finish what your husband started." Her eyes widened. "Back there? But there's nothing left." "There is always something left," Tayan murmured. "Even in ashes." Outside, the wind howled again, but in that moment, Evelyn no longer felt the cold. The Apache warrior standing before her was no longer a stranger. He was the only shield she had left between life and the storm of vengeance that was coming. The snow fell heavier as Tahan and Evelyn rode toward what was once Red Rock. The wind was merciless, biting through the folds of her coat and numbing her hands until she couldn't tell if she still held the reins. The Apache's horse, strong and sure-footed, cut a path through the icy drifts as the world faded into white silence. By the time they reached the edge of town, the sun had vanished behind a curtain of gray. Red Rock looked nothing like a town anymore, just charred remains, blackened timbers, and the twisted metal skeleton of the old mine shaft. The air smelled faintly of ash, as if the fire that had destroyed it never truly died. Evelyn slid off the horse, her boots sinking into the snow. "It feels like a graveyard," she whispered. Tayan dismounted silently, scanning the ruins. "It is," he said. "Your husband's grave is not the only one here." She turned to him, her breath visible in the frigid air. "You think this medallion has something to do with what happened?" Tayan crouched near a fallen beam and brushed away the snow, revealing charred ground beneath. "The mine was built over sacred Apache ground," he said. "Burial lands. When they found the medallion, they disturbed what should have been left sleeping. The fire was no accident, it was a warning. Evelyn hugged her arms around herself. Then why would James have kept it? He wasn't greedy. Maybe he tried to protect it, Tahan said quietly. Or return it. A distant rumble of thunder rolled through the canyon, though the sky was clear. It was deep, unnatural, like the growl of something old and buried. Evelyn glanced nervously toward the ruined mine entrance. What was that? Tahan rose slowly, his hand brushing the hilt of his knife. The spirits here are restless. The words hung heavy in the cold air. They moved cautiously toward the mouth of the mine, a gaping hole rimmed with frost and black smoke stains. The wind that came from inside wasn't cold but warm, carrying a faint smell of earth and metal. Tahan lit a torch from his saddlebag, its flame flickering weakly in the wind. Evelyn followed close behind as they descended the rocky slope. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, each step crunching over ice and debris. I used to come here, she murmured. James said this place would make us rich. He was wrong. Inside, the walls glittered faintly with quartz and frost. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. No wind, no birds, only the soft crackle of the torch and the faint sound of dripping water. Then Tahan stopped. Evelyn nearly bumped into him. What is it? He lifted the torch, revealing strange paintings etched into the stone. Symbols, animals, spirals, and one familiar shape, the same medallion design she'd shown him. Your husband found this, Tahan said. This was his secret. Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes wide. He told me the company forbade him from digging this far. They said this tunnel wasn't safe. Not safe for men, Tahan replied softly, but sacred for spirits. He reached out and traced a hand over one of the carvings, a circular mark surrounded by flames. This symbol means vengeance beneath the earth. The fire that took your husband wasn't just from coal dust or greed. The land itself burned. Before she could answer, a sudden noise echoed through the tunnel, a crunch of boots on gravel. Tahan blew out the torch instantly and pulled her behind a boulder. They crouched in the dark as the sound of voices carried faintly down the tunnel. I told you, Moran said they were heading this way, a man's voice growled. He wants that pouch back. Evelyn's heart froze. Tahan leaned close to her ear. His whisper was steady, commanding. We move when they pass. The torchlight from the intruders grew brighter, flickering through the cracks in the rock. She could make out 3 figures, rifles slung across their backs, one of them holding a lantern. They stopped near the carvings. The leader, tall, wearing a red scarf, spat on the ground. Old Indian drawings. Waste of time. That woman'll freeze before she makes it this far. Tahan's hand brushed Evelyn's arm gently, a silent signal to stay still. But then, the man with the lantern turned, and the light flashed across the boulder where they hid. Wait, what was that? Tahan reacted instantly. He threw his knife, hitting the lantern dead on. It shattered in a burst of fire and smoke, plunging the tunnel into darkness. Gunshots roared, the sound deafening in the confined space. Evelyn ducked low, clutching her head as sparks rained from the rock. Tahan moved like a shadow, silent, swift, deadly. The echo of his bowstring cut through the chaos, followed by a sharp cry. Then another. When the last echo faded, the tunnel fell silent again except for Evelyn's ragged breathing. Tahan returned, grabbing her hand. We can't stay here. More will come? They ran through the darkness, the medallion swinging from Evelyn's neck as if alive, glowing faintly with an amber light. She didn't dare look at it, didn't want to see what it meant. When they burst out of the mine into the frozen air, Evelyn collapsed into the snow, gasping. Tahan knelt beside her, his chest heaving. They'll follow us, she said between breaths. I know, he replied. But now they'll follow something worse. She looked up at him, confused. What do you mean? Tyon turned his gaze toward the mine where faint orange embers flickered deep inside, the earth's breath returning to life. The mountain remembers, he said quietly, and it doesn't forgive. The moon hung high above the canyon like a pale guardian, casting silver light over the desert. The wind carried the scent of burning sage and old memories, the kind that lingered long after the fire had died. Taza stood at the edge of the sacred circle, shirtless beneath the night sky, his powerful frame glistening with the remnants of sweat and blood from the battle that had nearly taken his life hours ago. His long black hair was tangled with streaks of dust, and his chest rose and fell in quiet rhythm. Across from him stood Clara, her torn dress fluttering against the cold wind, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from what she knew was coming. Between them, the fire burned low, fed by cedar and ancient roots. Its smoke coiled upward like the spirit of something unseen. Taza knelt before it, pressing his palm to the earth, whispering in Apache, words Clara could not understand, but whose meaning she could feel in her bones. "You saved me," he said, raising his head toward her, his voice low, edged with both gratitude and sorrow. "But by doing so, you have bound yourself to me in ways your people do not understand." Clara swallowed hard, taking a cautious step closer. "I don't care what they think. You would have died if I hadn't." Taza's dark eyes met hers, stopping her words mid-her. "A warrior's life belongs to the Great Spirit. When it is spared by another, it must be honored with balance. Blood for blood. Spirit for spirit." He took his knife, an obsidian blade carved with tribal marks, and drew it across his palm. The cut was clean, crimson streaking his bronzed skin. Then, slowly, he extended his hand toward her. Clara froze. The moment stretched like the silence before thunder. The fire crackled between them. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "It means you must share my burden," he said, voice deep as the canyon wind. "The curse that follows me, it follows you now." Her breath caught. "Curse?" He nodded once. "The men we fought today, they were not just outlaws. They desecrated a sacred site, a burial place of my ancestors. The earth has marked them, and all who stood with them." Clara's heart thudded. "But I didn't. You were there when their blood fell on the sand," Taza said quietly. "Now it calls to you." For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Clara looked down at her trembling hands and saw faint red dust shimmering against her skin, glowing faintly in the moonlight like embers beneath flesh. "What's happening to me?" she gasped. Taza's expression softened. He moved toward her slowly, his body lit by firelight, muscles tense, shadows cutting across his chest like painted war lines. "It will not harm you," he said. "Not if we honor the spirits together." He raised his cut hand again. "Join me." Clara hesitated, then lifted her palm. The blade gleamed once more, and she winced as he drew a shallow cut across her skin. Their blood mingled when he pressed his palm to hers, warmth meeting warmth. The fire flared suddenly, its light painting the desert in shades of crimson and gold. For an instant, the night around them vanished, replaced by visions that flooded their minds. Clara saw warriors on horseback, painted faces under a blood-red sky, arrows flying like comets through smoke. She heard drums echoing from the mountains, and a woman's cry, sorrowful, eternal. When she gasped and pulled away, Taza's eyes were still closed, his lips moving in a whisper. "It is done," he said at last, looking up at her. "Our spirits are one." Clara stepped back, her pulse racing. What does that mean for us?" He stood, tall and solemn, beneath the moon. "It means you can no longer return to who you were. You are part of this land now, and it will protect you as it protects me. But it will also test you." Taza reached out, brushing her hair back gently. His touch was soft, reverent. "The path ahead is not one of comfort, Clara, but it is ours." She met his gaze, those eyes full of fire and shadow, and despite the fear, she felt something stronger rise within her: trust, connection, fate. The fire crackled once more as coyotes howled in the distance. The blood on their hands began to dry, but the bond between them was alive, bound beneath the watchful eye of the desert moon. And somewhere beyond the canyon, unseen figures moved through the night, men who carried torches and hate, following tracks that led straight toward them. Tomorrow their oath would be tested by blood again. The night no longer felt like a refuge, it felt like a trap. Taza's sharp senses caught it first: the soft crackle of twigs beyond the canyon walls, the muffled snorts of restless horses, and the faint metallic clink of rifles being loaded. He turned his head slightly, motioning for Clara to stay low. "They're here," he whispered. Clara's heart pounded as she crouched beside him, clutching the edge of her shawl. The fire between them was dying, its light flickering weakly against the sandstone walls. The silence of the desert was broken by the distant hum of men who were coming to finish what they had started. "They tracked us," she breathed, fear cracking her voice. Taza nodded grimly. "White men with hatred in their eyes never forget what they've lost. And we took from them their power, their pride." He rose silently, his tall, muscular frame blending with the shadows. His long black hair shimmered faintly under the moonlight, and the bone necklaces resting against his bare chest caught the fire's glow. The cut on his palm had dried, leaving behind a thin, dark scar, a mark of the blood oath they had made. "What do we do?" Clara whispered, gripping his arm. He looked down at her, his expression both fierce and calm. "You will go through the ravine, follow the moon until you find the old oak. Wait for me there." Her eyes widened. "And you?" "I will lead them away," he said, tightening the strap on his blade. "No." The word escaped her before she could think. She rose, standing almost chest to chest with him. "I'm not leaving you again." The look in his eyes softened, but only slightly. "You do not understand," he said in a low voice. "If they catch you, they will not kill you quickly. They'll use you to draw me out." "I don't care," she snapped, tears brimming. "You saved me. You bled for me. You made me part of your world. Don't ask me to run from it now." For a long heartbeat, Taza said nothing. The wind howled through the canyon, tugging at his hair and her dress like unseen hands urging them both toward fate. Then, slowly, he reached out and cupped her face in his scarred hand. "You have the spirit of a warrior," he whispered. "But even the strongest must know when to hide." Before she could reply, a voice echoed through the night, harsh, drunken, and close. "Taza! You savage bastard, come out. We've got your witch with us." Clara's breath caught. She turned toward the sound and froze. Down the slope, torchlight flickered between the rocks. There were at least 6 men, riders, armed and angry. And in front of them was a figure tied to a post. Gagged and shaking, it wasn't Clara. It was Marcel, the ranch hand who had helped them escape from the town. "They're using him," Taza muttered, his eyes narrowing. "They want me to come down." He moved forward, but Clara grabbed his wrist. "No, there has to be another way." "There isn't," he said, voice steady. "His life is the price for mine." He pulled free and stepped into the open, the moonlight striking his skin like molten silver. The men below shouted, torches flaring brighter. "Well, look who crawled out of his hole," the leader sneered. Half naked and thinking he's still a god. Taza stood tall, every muscle drawn, every breath measured. "Let him go," he called out. "Your quarrel is with me." The man laughed. "Oh, we'll let him go, right after we send you both to hell." Gunfire cracked like thunder. Bullets tore through the canyon, sparking off the rocks. Taza ducked behind a boulder, pulling Clara with him as dust and fragments exploded around them. She clung to his arm, trembling. "We can't win this." Taza's jaw tightened. "We don't need to win. We just need to survive till dawn." He snatched a burning torch from the ground and hurled it toward a dry bush. Flames erupted instantly, licking up the canyon wall. The fire spread fast, fueled by wind and sagebrush, turning the night into a storm of orange light dot as smoke filled the air. Taza grabbed Clara's hand. "Now we run." They sprinted through the narrow ravine, the roar of fire chasing them, gunshots echoing in the distance. Sparks rained down from above, and the ground trembled with the weight of collapsing stone. When they finally stumbled into the open desert, the fire's glow still painted the horizon, a blazing scar against the black sky. Taza stopped, breathing hard, his chest heaving. Clara turned to look back, tears streaking through the dust on her cheeks. Did we lose them?" Taza looked toward the flames, eyes reflecting the inferno. "For now," he said. "But the desert remembers all sins." And so do they. He turned to her, his voice quiet but certain. "Tomorrow, we stop running. Tomorrow we fight." The first light of dawn crept slowly across the horizon, staining the desert in muted shades of gold and gray. Smoke still rose from the canyon behind them, a black column twisting into the morning sky, marking the place where the night had burned itself into memory. Taza stood on a rocky ledge overlooking the valley, his broad, bare chest streaked with soot and blood. His long black hair hung wild around his face, tangled with ash and wind. Beside him, Clara sat against a boulder, clutching a blanket he had wrapped around her shoulders. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow with exhaustion, but there was a new strength there, something born in fire and fear. For a long while, neither spoke. The silence between them was thick, but it was not empty. It was the silence of survivors. Finally, Clara whispered, "Do you think they're gone?" Taza scanned the ridgeline, his eyes sharp, wary. "No," he said. "Men like them don't stop until the land swallows them whole. But the fire bought us time." He turned to her, kneeling beside her, his gaze softening. "You fought bravely last night." Clara gave a faint, weary smile. "I didn't think I'd make it through." "You did," he said, "because you stopped fearing death. That is when the spirit begins to live." She looked at him, really looked, and saw more than the warrior she had met days ago. Beneath the scars and the calm strength, there was a man who carried centuries of pain. A man who had lost everything, yet still stood tall against the world. "Taza," she said quietly, "what happens now?" He rose, his shadow long in the morning light. "Now we end it." Before she could respond, he was already moving, gathering his knife, checking the edge, scanning the sand for tracks. Clara followed his gaze and saw them, faint hoof prints leading toward the east, toward a ridge where the desert stretched wide and unforgiving. "They'll rest near the creek," he said. "Their horses will be thirsty. That's where we strike." "Taza," she began, standing shakily, "you can't take them all alone." He looked back at her, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. "I won't be alone." She blinked, confused, until he pointed toward the horizon. There, like ghosts rising from the mist, came shadows on horseback. Half a dozen riders, their faces painted in ash and red clay, their long hair flowing. Apache warriors, silent, proud, and fierce. "They answered my call," Taza said quietly. "They come not for revenge, but for balance." Clara's breath caught as the riders approached. Their leader, an older warrior with braids threaded with feathers, nodded at Taza, then at her. "The white woman carries the mark," he said in Apache, his tone respectful. "She carries my spirit," Taza replied. "She is one of us." The old warrior grunted approval. Then the spirits will fight with you today. Moments later, they were riding, fast and silent, through the desert. Clara sat behind Taza, her arms around his waist, the wind stinging her face. She could feel the tension in his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the heat of his skin against her palms. Ahead, the creek shimmered faintly, a ribbon of water winding through Stone Dot as they neared the ridge. Voices drifted up, rough laughter, the clink of bottles. The outlaws had camped carelessly, thinking themselves safe. Taza signaled the others. The warriors spread out, melting into the rocks. Then he dismounted, helping Clara down. "Stay here," he murmured as she grabbed his hand. "No matter what happens, I'm with you." He hesitated, then nodded once, a silent promise. The first arrow flew like lightning, striking the leader of the outlaw square in the chest. The man fell without a sound. Chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked, men shouted, horses screamed. The Apaches moved like shadows, swift and precise. Taza charged through the smoke, his blade flashing in the rising sun. 2 men fell before they could even aim. Another swung his rifle, but Taza caught his wrist, twisted, and struck. The sound of bone breaking sharp, and final. Clara, watching from behind the rocks, could barely breathe. The scene unfolded like something ancient, something inevitable, the desert claiming its due. When the last shot echoed across the canyon, it was over. The creek ran red in places, but the wind was calm again. Taza stood in the middle of it all, his chest heaving, his hair soaked with sweat. The warriors began to chant softly, a song of endings and beginnings. Clara approached him slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. "It's done," she whispered. He turned to her, eyes dark but peaceful. "No," he said. "Now it begins." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He took her hands gently. "This land, it no longer belongs to the men who destroy it. It belongs to those who honor it. You have seen its truth. You are bound to it now, to me, to the fire, to the spirit of this desert." Clara's heart trembled, but she did not pull away. "Then let it begin," she said softly, as the sun rose higher. The warriors rode east, their silhouettes glowing in the light. Taza and Clara followed, hand in hand, leaving behind the ashes of a world that had tried to destroy them. And though the wind still whispered of danger and loss, there was something new in the air, a quiet promise of life after fire, of love born not from comfort, but from courage. The desert watched them go, silent and eternal, as dawn claimed the world once more.